everyone, welcome to the fading and grinding tutorial. I do want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about the process of fading this car down, and basically under a minute to get this car faded. It's literally a few airbrush passes and you're done. The one thing I was leery about was overspray getting on my video camera lens, so I didn't record that process. Like I said before, it's basically a side-by-side pass with the airbrush all around the car, and you're done with the fade. The next thing you can do is seal it with dull coat if you'd like before you move on to the grinding process. For the fade, I used Polyscale Reefer White and diluted that with regular bottled water. I started with 50-50% ratio. Didn't want to get too opaque or too clear, so I made up a bottle, shot that through the airbrush, and tested it on a piece of plastic until I got the look I was going for. I was looking for prototype pictures for this build. I really didn't find anything too interesting along the lines of rust streaking, so I thought, I'm just going to do this car well. I'm going to concentrate on some of the other details that are on this car and do the best I can to make those look great. There's an ACI plate on this car. I've never done that before, so I figured, how am I going to tackle doing this? You see that I'm looking at a prototype picture to help me along with this build, but this car definitely won't be in the prototype section on the website. It's going to be in the fantasy section, but definitely having a prototype picture to look at while you're doing the build is great to have. And I'm pulling a few interesting things off of those photos, and like I said, it's going to be in the fantasy section. But to accomplish the ACI plate, looking at the prototype picture, I noticed that it's actually on a welded plate that's welded to the side of the car. So, I thought, how am I going to do that? So I was going to head out and get some styrene, but then I thought, wait a minute, I have this lid from a luncheon container that is really thin plastic that if I just cut it up, it'll do the job. So I cut a couple of little pieces and painted them up, applied the decals, glued them to the side of the car, and that's it. Before the video begins, I wanted to show you a closer look at the grime streaks and how they came out and what we're going for. To create the grime streaks, I used black gouache and microsol as my thinning agent. As far as how far I thinned it, you can see right here on my palette, it's pretty thin, almost transparent, but primarily this gouache wash is to dirty up the seams along the car, bolts, rungs, anything that you think would accumulate grime over time. That is what this gouache wash is for. Okay, so now we're going to create our gouache wash. I use Winsor & Newton Ivory Black and microsol as my thinning agent. Put a little bit on your palette, and then we're going to start to thin it out. So if you want, you can add a little bit more microsol to thin it out. How will you know until you apply it to the car whether it's too dark? Well, even if it is applied to the car, you can always wet your brush again apply that to the car, and you can control, the opaqueness. Just add more microsol. But that's pretty much what my wash is going to look like. Okay, so now we have our wash, and we're going to apply it to the car. You see, I'm just brushing it right on, all the way to the end. You can also work it into the ladder rungs, bolts, any area that you think that is going to accumulate grime over time. While you're brushing, if it starts to get a little too light, just go ahead and grab more wash from your palette and reapply. If you feel it's getting too dark, you just add more microsol to your brush and then thin it out on the car right there. But definitely, get this wash into all the seams, around the rungs, bolts, etc. So what I'm doing here is I'm drying my brush off and going back now with a semi-dry brush and basically taking off what I just put on, which is leaving behind the gouache in the seams of the car. The brush is also creating slight streaks of grime coming down the car. So you can dry your brush off and have a semi-wet brush and use that to create the streaks. If your brush gets too dry, then just re-wet it with some microsol and get it to a point where it's semi-wet. I'm going to let the video run here a little bit longer so you can see how long the process takes. Once you get the grime streaks looking the way you want them, move on to some of the other details on the ladders, and if you want, you can dull coat this before you move on to the next step. I just want to make a quick note that we're just dirtying up the rungs and the bolts right now. We're not really concentrating on the finer detail. We're going to come back later and we're going to add rust around those bolts. We're going to do that later. Okay, so there's our first gouache wash. We're going to move on now to the rooftop. And using the same wash, we're going to do the same thing right on top of the roof. So you can see the gouache on my palette is dried up, but just adding a little bit of microsol back to the palette, you can re-wet it and reuse it. I'm doing the same thing here as I did on the side of the car, and you're just blocking it in everywhere you can. In the grooves, around the hinges. Now there's going to be a photo etched roof walk installed, and some of this grime beneath that you probably aren't going to see, but you got to put it there. If you don't, I'll know that I didn't do it. So you definitely gotta block it in. You gotta dirty it up. In fact, there's probably going to be rust dripping from that roof walk over time. So That's another step we're going to tackle a little bit later on. Once I've blocked in all the gouache, pretty much just washed it on, you kind of see me going here just stippling a little bit. Just kind of an effect I like. Definitely don't want to see brush streaks going back and forth. But by doing this stipple technique, it just kind of softens the streakiness of the wash going on. Here's a closer look. You can see it just looks like dirt built up over time. The thing about weathering is that each time you do a new project, you find out new ways of doing things. Here I'm, moving the brush along, trying to let the grooves capture the gouache, and you try different methods. There's no real rule book on how to do this, but when it pleases the eye and you get the look that you're going for, that's all you can do. But it's one of those things that if you keep reworking it and reworking it, sometimes you can work it a little bit too much, and you'll mess it up, and then you got to start all over again. But once you're satisfied with the look that you're going for, don't touch it, leave it, let it dry, and seal it, dull coat it, and look something like this. Thanks for watching, and the next video is probably going to be on how I'm weathering the bottom bays. Thanks.